Hey guys, thanks for being here and a huge welcome to the Holy Shed. And if you're new in these parts, please feel especially welcome. And don't be afraid of all the little creatures that find refuge in this place during the winter months. They're all very fine Christian creepy crawlies. Anyway, get on with it, Pat will be saying. So, look, little secret. We're not actually in the shed. We're in South London, where I preached this morning at our home church, St Leonard's in Streatham. And gosh, my beautiful friend and rector, Anna, I think she really does enjoy giving me the tricky little passages that she'd rather avoid to preach on. And today it was the parable of, well, I'll tell you what I called it. It was the parable of the big fat capitalist. Truth be known, I love it. I love challenging passages of scripture to get my teeth into. So if you fancy having a listen to my upside downy take on the parable of the talents, I'll post it as soon as it's available. I'll post it on Facebook. Now, today marks the end of Interfaith Week. So I thought, hey, I'd better say a bit about religious diversity and stuff since, it's the end of the week and only this little time to get it in. So, first of all, let me introduce you to someone. Let me introduce you to a dear friend who passed away just in August this year, Joel Ilson. Joel was born in Montreal in the same year as me, actually, although I wasn't born in Montreal, as you know. But he spent most of his life here in the UK. Joel was also a Jew, and that's how I met him. I met him through an interfaith panel that we both sat on for several years. Joel was just an amazing, highly entertaining, fun man. I loved him to bits. He epitomized for me things that I love so much about Jewish tradition, most of all, his ironic, self deprecating sense of humour. I mean, he regularly had us all in tucks of laughter in the forum. Sometimes, he would shock me. You never know what he was going to come out with next. He would shock people with, in a pleasant way, with his irreverence. And thanks to the wonder of technology, I can share with you a short clip of him talking about this very subject of humour. It's not a very good video, but you'll get the feel. And it's the way he introduces himself right at the beginning that cracks me up. It's as if he was still here in the room talking with me. Enjoy this.
Hello, my name is Joel Ilson. Actually, I was born Joel Urovich, but when I was 1 year old, the family name was changed. But that's another story. Right now, I just want to talk to you about Jewish humor. I hadn't appreciated that Jewish humor is a little bit different, I think, from the humor of other religions. Now, my mother was Jewish, my father was Jewish, so that makes me Jewish. And I thought, well, humor is just humor, the same everywhere. But religious humor is sometimes a little different because with some religions, I've detected a feeling that people get a little annoyed if you're making a joke about, say, something like angels, or a joke about scripture, or even a joke about God. But, with Judaism, I think there's a little bit more latitude, a little bit more tolerance, because the thought is that the humor is a God-given thing, and therefore we should use it. Humor is a great thing. God has got the greatest sense of humor of anybody. I mean, God's got the greatest intelligence. God's got the greatest power. God has the greatest wisdom. Why should God also not have the greatest sense of humor, greater than anybody in the whole world? Now, let's face it. If you tell a nasty, humorous story or joke about a person who is, say, not very confident, well, that's not very nice at all. One should not do that. But if you're using good-hearted humor and you're making fun of a fellow who has got plenty of self-confidence, well, this person's not going to mind. They'll laugh along with everybody else. And there is nobody more self-confident than God. God appreciates a good joke, and appreciates a good joke even about himself and his scriptures, and indeed all of the other trappings and superficial stuff about religions.
Hey, I know you'd like to go on listening to Joel rather than me because he goes on to, tell some Jewish jokes and stuff. Joel, I miss you so much, buddy. And such a sad day when I heard that you'd left us. As I say, I met Joel through the school Interfaith Forum, which was attended by members of local faith communities as well as students from the school in Upminster, north of London, who and sometimes the students actually chaired the discussion, which actually helped quite a lot, really, because they could be quite ruthless with us when we were yakking on a little bit too much. The forum was set up by the wonderful head of RE in the school at the time, Barbara Usher, who created a warm and generous atmosphere where we could all share experiences safely and we could argue affably about religion and theology. We had so much fun and laughter, and in the middle there was a break for a nice cup of tea and what I like to call interfaith sandwiches which ensured everyone was catered for. I wrote a chapter in the Bad Christians Manifesto which I called Tea and Biscuits Religion, subtitled It's About Making Friends, for God's sake. Among other things, I related in that chapter the story of a demonstration outside a mosque in York, a demonstration by the far-right English Defence League, the EDL, after the terrorist killing of a British soldier in Woolwich. Magnificently, the local Muslim community, instead of clashing with these Islamophobic demonstrators, instead of doing that, they invited them into the grounds of the mosque for a cup of tea and a custard cream, followed by an impromptu game of football. I'm telling you guys, I laughed out loud with delight when I read about that. Tea and biscuits religion. That'll do me nicely, thank you. And what fantastic wisdom, apart from anything else, by those dear people at the mosque. Appropriately, the motto of the school where we had the panel was love as brethren, encourage learning. And I really like that. And, it's exactly what we had, what we enjoyed in our forum, with a regular panel of an ordained Buddhist, a Muslim imam, a Reformed Jew, Joel, and me. Plus, occasionally on the panel, we had a Hindu woman and a shamanic pagan. No one was there to try and convert anybody or to set other people right. It was a space to listen as well as to speak, to learn and to share, with the perfect right to disagree when you needed to. And thankfully, the disagreement was always agreeable. Although there was one evening when some zealous Christians came into the audience, clearly with the aim of getting everybody saved. They came in to preach at everyone. And then there was another occasion when a bunch of enthusiastic young Muslim men appeared and quizzed me, out of all the panel, about my beliefs, and then told me that I was going to face hellfire when I died. Well, none of this really fazed anybody in the forum. As I recall, the fervent visitors on both occasions were met with little more than wry smiles. And in my own case, a gracious apology afterwards from a beautiful elderly Muslim man who came and told me how much he appreciated things that I said in the forum and asked if he could give me a hug. It was one of the easiest decisions I've ever had to make in my life. Now, my engagement with interfaith dialogue developed over, quite a number of years prior to being involved with the school forum. But a crucial point for me was reached during a planning meeting for a certain large Christian event that's held every Easter, where I was invited to be one of 3 speakers in a seminar looking at different faiths. Each of us was designated 20 minutes to talk about either Islam, Hinduism, or Buddhism. I was allocated Buddhism. At the planning meeting, we were handed a set of notes to work from. And up to that point, I was under the sad impression that the object of the seminar was education for everyone who attended. But reading through the notes, I rapidly realized that it was really an exercise in evangelical propaganda, designed simply to contrast the truth of Christianity with the error of other faiths. Well, I just couldn't hold fire, really. I just piped up and said, I can't possibly do this. It's a stitch up. If somebody wrote this sort of stuff and presented it about Christianity, we would rightly be outraged. Well, rather predictably, my outburst did not go down well. And when I suggested an alternative strategy, that we set aside the notes and the whole approach and invite instead some real Muslims, Hindus and Buddhists to join us for an open discussion about the different faiths, I think you know what happened. There were very disapproving looks around the room, and after a pause, the chair of the meeting politely submitted that perhaps this seminar wasn't for me. What a relief, I can tell you. I mean, this was like in the late 80s now, a long time ago. But I do remember I went home exhilarated by the experience and convinced that what I needed to do was to seek out more face-to-face interactions with people of other religious faiths. And now, well, what would it be, 35 years or more later, I have many virtual and real-life friends from other faith communities who I consider to be fellow travellers in the quest for truth and spiritual enlightenment, for what I would call God, but other people may name differently. We're not all the same. We follow different religious paths, we hold different beliefs, yet we share a common humanity and a common search for truth and love, which is far more fundamental than any religious differences. And I believe that as we, each in our own way, seek to become better human beings, we instinctively move toward the heart of what it is that we all most deeply believe in, but name and pursue in different ways. I was helped along this interfaith path years ago by the writings of a great missionary, an American missionary called E. Stanley Jones, who went from America to India in the early 20th century with the intention of converting people on that dark subcontinent to Christianity from, the darkness of other religions. But after spending some time there, and observing people and seeing what life was like there, he became overwhelmed by what he saw as the depth of enlightenment and spirituality of people in that country. Way more than he felt he could see in people back at home in his own land. Well, after almost suffering a breakdown and returning home, E. Stanley Jones had a vision of Christ in a sari, and that's led to the title of his most famous book, which is called The Christ of the India Road. And so he exchanged proselytizing for what he called round table conversations. There wasn't a literal round table. It was a metaphor for saying no one's at the top here. No one is leading. No one is, coercing or controlling. This was a round table. Always liked round tables. And it was a place where, conversations could be had with people of different faiths, or indeed of none. He invited atheists and agnostics too. But it was a place where they could talk freely and safely about their experiences. No one could preach or try to convert any of the others. The idea was simply to share their stories. In fact, the only rule I think that they had was that they would not talk like doctrine or theology. What they would do was share experiences. Tell us what your religion or your agnosticism or your atheism has done for you in experience, Jones said. And it's interesting, he wrote quite a few books, including a biography of Gandhi, with whom he did sit at round table, by the way, I think on more than one occasion. And Martin Luther King said that it was Jones's biography of Gandhi which I think was either titled or subtitled A Portrayal of a Friend. It was that inspired Martin Luther King toward non-violence in the civil rights movement. The essence of any genuine discussion is that each person is open to the possibility of being changed by the process of that mutual sharing. And without this, we might as well just stand in front of a mirror and talk to ourselves. So it follows that the object of interacting with people of different faith backgrounds is not simply, so we can have greater tolerance. That's a terrible word, of difference. No, rather, the object is that the expectation that our own faith will be enlarged and enriched by the other, not replaced by the other, but that our faith will be enlarged and enriched. That's what people like E. Stanley Jones look for, what people like Gandhi look for too, not to go around converting people, but through the process of mutual sharing to all be enlarged and enriched in our own faith. The philosopher Jacob Needleman tells a story about a high mountain, the top of which represents being with God. And because the mountain is so high, it needs a massive base traversing many countries, cultures, and climate zones. People have traditions about how to climb the mountain, depending on where they're situated around the mountain. In tropical climates, they would set out in a pair of shorts, a safari helmet, a mosquito net or whatever around their hat. In Arctic climes, they would wear a big snow parka and goggles and boots to climb the mountain. When the people from the tropical climates get about halfway up, they start to feel the cold and they need to go back to get a sweater or pull it out of their bag. When the people from the colder climates get halfway, they're forced to shed their outer clothing because it just feels too hot. However, when the climbers get to the top, Needleman said, well, you've guessed it, they end up dressed pretty much the same way. The problem, he says, is when people walk around the base of the mountain and argue about how to dress. Now, beautiful metaphor. I've said before that to me, faith traditions are like cultural or linguistic systems with their own, customs, their own rituals, their own grammar, their own vocabularies. The point is not to get all et up with these differences and argue the toss about this language against that, or to compare beliefs, customs, or rituals in a kind of competitive fashion. Our religious language or our customs are better than yours. Because look, is French better than Russian? Or one culture's preferences superior to another's? Of course not. That's missing it. The real point is that we share a common humanity. We share a common longing for a better, kinder world. We each seek to connect with that which is greater than ourselves, however that may be defined or understood. Language is not about linguistic theory. That's a valid pursuit in itself, but for most of us, overwhelmingly, language isn't about linguistic theory and grammar and all the rest of it. It's about self-expression. It's about connection and communication with other people. It's about creating community. That's really what lies at the heart of language. That, I think, is what lies at the heart of the faith journey too. And in these days when people of other faiths and cultures do not simply dwell on the other side of the globe, but now they're in our towns and cities, they're on our streets, we need to become, I think, religiously multilingual, developing greater knowledge and understanding of the faith of other people, so that we can focus on commonalities instead of on differences. Now, does this mean that we should strive to obliterate differences, move toward, a single global religious tradition? Hell no. Even if that were possible, it would be highly undesirable. It would be an abominable idea, actually. The diversity of languages and cultures on a human level in the world are spectacularly wonderful. And in the same way, the diversity of faith traditions, including that of people who, don't have faith, the diversity, including that, all brings beauty and richness to the conversation, to the world family and their conversation. Without religious diversity, we would end up with a single tradition that believed it had everything. Yuck. How awful would that be? This is not about obliterating difference. No, we may focus hugely on the differences. But if we're doing that in love and friendship and listening with an openness to learn, that's a very different thing to if we sit back and feel threatened by the differences that we see in other people. Some people accuse me, and people like me, of relativism in this respect and syncretism. Two lovely labels, aren't they? Weaponized words to try to silence or discredit. But look, I do not believe in syncretism, which is basically means a merging or an amalgamating of religions for the reasons I've just stated. There's too much beauty in the diversity. I'm not remotely interested in syncretism, in amalgamating faiths into one, even if that one is Christianity. I love difference and diversity. And you know what? Looking around in the world, I'm pretty sure God loves diversity too. I mean, do you know there are 400,000 known species of beetles in the world? Why? God knows. None of the rest of us do. No. I believe in pluralism, peaceful coexistence, not syncretism, the obliteration of difference. There's a huge gulf between those two things. And relativism, the other weaponized label in the religious context, relativism basically means that there is no absolute truth, that everything is relativized, or we don't know if that's true or it's not true, and so only that which each religion happens to believe to be true is true. Well, I'm not a relativist in that sense. My position is that none of us can ever say for certain what is absolutely true, for the simple reason that we're finite, that we are situated, creatures tussling with mystery. So I don't believe in relativism. I believe in perspectivism, if you want to give it a label. That is to say that we all have a vantage point. We all have a viewing point. And the way I view this here, from my sort of Christian background and all that brings, is going to be different to someone situated over there. Their perspective is different if they've, grown up as children in, Delhi or, wherever in Saudi Arabia or whatever it is. Meanwhile, I have my beliefs and my convictions, which I hold to be true, but of necessity, I remain open to be wrong, or I remain open to further enlightenment. Also, meanwhile, I relish the opportunity to listen to read about, to debate with those with different beliefs and convictions, partly so that I can put my oar in, because I like doing that, but also, more importantly, to intentionally open myself to learn from other people, from other faith traditions. As the Manic Street Preachers put it on their album cover, "This is my truth, tell me yours." Great title. I long ago retired, as it were, from trying to convert people to Christianity. But what I will do is present confidently and graciously and generously the case for following Jesus, which, by the way, Gandhi said that he did, and he saw that to be perfectly compatible with being a faithful Hindu. So, I think it's, I can and I will confidently and wholeheartedly present the case for following Jesus. But that's not a case of saying you must take that label off and put this one on, that's jiggering around with labels. What we're interested in is what goes on in people's lives, isn't it? I don't much care, really, if people call me names, Mr. Relativist or Mr. Syncretist, heretic, or whatever else it is. I'm a human being. That's who I am, a follower of Jesus, a student of anyone who has something to teach me that will make me a better human being, wherever they're coming from, of any faith or none. I believe it's possible, essential actually, to hold strong convictions without rubbishing the convictions of others. These two things are not incompatible. This is my truth, tell me yours, is not a one-way street to relativism. It's a statement of humility. It's goodbye to enmity, hello to peacemaking. It's a declaration of friendship that embraces diversity and spurns coercive unity. Dear friends, let me say this. I sit here today heartbroken by what is happening in Gaza, in Israel, and on the West Bank. I despise the brutal acts of Hamas. I despise the inhumane violence of the Israeli government in Gaza. I weep for the victims of anti-Semitism. I hate anti-Semitism. I weep for Palestinians driven from their homes and their land, stolen by settlers for decades. And I know that if my dear friend Joel were sitting here with me today, he would say no different. We would be utterly united, longing for justice, weeping for the suffering, whoever it is that's suffering. This thing that's going on today isn't primarily a religious conflict, but religion is part of it, as it is indeed in other conflicts around the world. And it's this part that makes me want to join John Lennon in imagining a state of things where there is no religion, just people living life in peace. But that's all too simplistic, lovely sentiment, lovely song. But I dare to believe that faith practiced properly, regardless of tradition, can be a massive part of healing things, of creating a better future. It's true that the world is war-torn in many areas, but it's not rocket science, guys. It's about making friends, for God's sake, recognizing common faith. I mean, it's like, look, that fictitious Martian out there looking down on planet Earth and thinking they're all freaking crazy because we're all just the same creatures, different colors, different backgrounds, different beliefs, etc., 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 living on this tiny little beautiful, beautiful planet hanging there in space. It's about more tea and biscuits religion for me, the subversive art of godly love and civility. So that's my little contribution for Interfaith Week. And it's a shame with many of these things that we have a week of it, because I think interfaith is something we should be focusing on and thinking about throughout the year in, year out, as with many other things. But at least I think having a specific point in the calendar helps us to intentionally focus on this subject and say, do you know what? We've got to make friends. Forget all the other stuff that surrounds it. At the heart of it's about making friends. And that goes for not just the area of different religions, but of so many other parts of life too. Okay, I have a prayer. The picture, by the way, I took when we visited Bethlehem 5 years ago, and we met so many wonderful, wonderful people on the West Bank. Constantly, what I heard Palestinian people talking to constantly was beautiful resistance. They weren't violent people, the ones that we met. They were looking for beautiful, there was something to resist. And, well, it's a great statement, isn't it? we all need a lot more hummus. Let's pray. God of friends and enemies, whose love conspires to blur the line between the two, enlarge our souls that we may gaze into the eyes of another to find ourselves looking back, even when minds and hearts are worlds apart. Teach us to stand resilient, owning our truth with integrity, while also attending to doubts and loves longing to be heard. Help us to see that despite the comfort certainty brings, truth always comes to us as a crumb and never an entire loaf. Amen. Okay, well, what we're going to do now is make a toast. So if you've got something handy, I invite you to join me in a toast now. A toast to tea and biscuits religion, hey? Wine and cheese if you prefer, doesn't matter. A toast to generosity, humility, and just good old-fashioned civility. A toast to difference that doesn't divide but enriches. A toast to doubts and loves that help us to think again, that help us to listen more carefully, help us to see wood for trees even in the middle of a forest of different opinions, beliefs and ideas. A toast to something far more important than religion, to being human for God's sake. L'chaim, to life. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, dear friends, for joining me today, for lending me your ears. And I hope that you found something not just interesting, but enriching and stimulating, challenging maybe, to go away with. And if you like what I'm doing here, you can support us. You can buy us a coffee or two. You just have to follow the link which is on the screen now. And we offer our deep thanks to everyone who supports us, not just like this, but, sends us messages of encouragement and so on. You don't know how much that means to us. So, just one other parish notice is that this week I will be leading another Soul Space on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. I'm looking forward to this, really. I believe in a better way. And we'll be developing some of the thoughts that we've had here in the shed today in a slightly different, more visual, probably, way. And if you've never been Soul Space, hey, give it a try. You may hate Zoom and all that, but you can put up with it for just an hour or so. You don't have to show up visually if you don't want to. It's a lovely collage of music, videos, film clips, images, poetry, and of course a fair bit of me in the background. But love to have you join me for that. So there we are. I'm going to finish in a moment with a video which I used somewhere back in the middle of the pandemic. It's of the Hanin Women's Choir. It's a female singing group which performs traditional Syrian folk songs, and it's a choir that was of people that were forcibly displaced Syrian women who decided to face their pain and suffering with intellectual and courage and cultural empowerment. And it provides, its participants with support as well as helping to preserve the Syrian heritage. It's intended to create vocal groups within the Syrian diaspora, and I love it to bits. I don't know what they're singing about, by the way, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. So that's about it, really. Thank you for being here. Have a great week. Be kind to people round about you. As I often say, kindness is just love in action. Be kind to the world. Be kind to yourself most of all, because it's out of that we can be kind to others. Stay human. I'll see you soon, and enjoy these lovely ladies' choir. If you want to know what a refugee looks like, watch that again. That's what they all are.